Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of the stories we've been following for you today. Europe's largest nuclear power plant is in Russian hands now, while the UN Atomic Agency says the reactors have not been hit. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Brussels today meeting with NATO and EU leaders. What did they commit to, and how long do they think the war in Ukraine will actually last? Former Defense Department Director of Cybersecurity, retired Colonel John Millis, joins us to assess the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, and we speak to U.S. Congressman Pete Stauber to find out how the war in Ukraine is directly impacting the American people. Russian forces are in control of Europe's largest nuclear power plant after shelling it in the middle of the night. The UN Atomic Agency says the reactors have not been hit, and the plant is still operating with no change in radiation levels. A projectile hit a training center at the nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine and started a fire. It happened when Russian and Ukrainian forces fought over the energy hub earlier on Friday. The nuclear plant is the largest in Europe and produces a quarter of Ukraine's energy.
Warning, equipment of the Russian Federation is firing on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. There is a real threat of a nuclear danger at the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe.
Ukrainian firefighters later put out the fire. The nuclear plant has 6 reactors, and one of them was in operation.
There are no casualties and victims among the unarmed civilian population. At the nuclear power plant, the 4th power unit is in operation. It works without hindrance.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky condemned the attack. He says this could turn out to be as dangerous as 6 Chernobyls and calls on Europe to act. The UN's International Atomic Energy Agency says Ukrainian staff are still running the operations, although Russian troops have taken over the plant. Russia denies that it is responsible for hitting the nuclear plant. The country's diplomats say Russian troops have been in control of the city, which hosts the nuclear plant since Monday. And NATO on Friday denied Ukraine's request to make the country a no-fly zone. NATO says it would lead to a wider war in Europe. Russia and Ukraine are trying to set up a 3rd round of talks this weekend. Diplomats of U.S. and Europe today gathered in Brussels, discussing the next steps. They warn of a war with no near end in sight. NTD's Iris Tao has more.
Unfortunately, tragically, horrifically, this may not be over soon.
That's a dire warning from U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He's in Brussels today meeting with NATO, G7, and EU allies to discuss how to help Ukraine and what to do next in sanctioning Russia.
And if we allow those principles to be challenged, as Putin is doing now, with impunity, that will open a Pandora's box of trouble for not just us, but quite frankly for the entire world.
He adds that the U.S. and Europe must continue to be tough on Russia until the war ends. And by that, he's not ruling out the possibility of a conflict if NATO is at stake.
We seek no conflict, but if conflict comes to us, we're ready for it, and we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
Blinken was repeatedly questioned today on what else can the U.S. and the world do to effectively deter Russia. He says they want to downgrade Russia as a leading energy supplier over time. However,
the immediate effect would be to raise prices at the pump for Americans and also to pad Russian profits with rising prices.
The White House also weighed in today, citing a caveat as it considers how to cut Russian energy use.
But what's really essential is that we maintain a steady supply of global energy. We don't want to disrupt. Look, energy is a global market, and we do not want to disrupt that market.
But he also says the door is still open to dialogue and diplomacy with Russia. Blinken will be in Poland tomorrow, and the White House is also considering sending Vice President Kamala Harris to Poland as well to show solidarity with NATO and Ukraine. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Last night, a battle over the largest nuclear facility in Europe took place in Ukraine between Russian and Ukrainian forces. Here with us to take a look at the ongoing conflict, we're happy to have former Director of Cybersecurity at the Department of Defense, retired U.S. Army Colonel John Mills. Now, Colonel, Russia must have known that the world was going to come down on them as heavy as they have so far. What do you think drove Putin to this point?
Well, this was always kind of a high-stakes event. He felt that he needed to assert himself into the Ukraine, and I'm really convinced this is really part of a new strategy between him and China, that as the junior partner, the agreement was for him to kick off first, and then China will follow with the main effort in the Pacific and in Asia. But with Putin, you have to really, Desert Storm really shaped and influenced how they felt about military operations. It awed them, and it also humiliated them. It was a total rejection of Soviet tactics and equipment. I think he was hoping for a Desert Storm-like strike with 2 or 3 days to essentially seize Kyiv and Kharkov. Kharkov is roughly, we're into the second week, seems to still be contested. They just had a 2-star general get killed there, leading the ground action. That was Sukhovsky, who was the leader of the airborne reinforcements, and he was killed in action.
Now, Colonel, you were former director of cybersecurity at the Department of Defense. What role is cyber warfare playing in this operation? And does Ukraine have a cyber capability, and if so, to what extent?
Oh, wow, where to begin on this? Okay, the Ukraine has for the last 20 years, but I've really started getting involved about 2010. The Ukraine was always ungoverned space and a sanctuary. Remember that term sanctuary from the Rumsfeld days, but it was a sanctuary it was a Wild West of intel community activities from everyone around the world. So everybody around the world had an intelligence community footprint in the Ukraine, and there was lots of cyber attacks emanating from the Ukraine, from Russians, from organized crime, from Chinese, from Venezuelans, Iranians, from all kinds of folks. And it was crazy, and it has been crazy. So it's always been confusing trying to establish a source and accountability for the cyber activities, which could include denial of service attacks, could include ransomware, could include just basic smash, break, and enter, and exfiltration of data sets. So the Ukraine has been that for years, and there's been a lot of cyber attacks over the years from the Ukraine that really were from Russian enclaves. And there's lots of Russian enclaves in the Ukraine. A lot of people they just think to the east in the Donbass region or the Crimea. Oh, actually throughout the Ukraine there are Russian enclaves, which is part of the pretense the Russians use for a move in is to provide to save their Slavic brothers and sisters from the cruel oppression. But this is the challenge. Ukraine has been corrupt, ungoverned space for 20 years, and unfortunately everyone has taken advantage of that. It's very messy.
Now, Colonel, you've mentioned China a couple of times. Does the United States run the risk of creating a little bit being over-emotional in this situation and thereby pushing Russia closer to China, creating a much more dangerous situation as the dust settles?
Well, okay, let's break that down. Good comment, Steve. First, are we going to move them closer? There's no way we can move them closer. They're as close as they can be right now. They are a de facto axis or alliance of, let's say, evil, if I may say that. But you also got to throw in, this also means Venezuela and Iran. So you got at least a four-pack, and throw in the wild card of North Korea as a fifth element. So I don't see how you can push them any closer. They essentially, it was November or December, they signed a extremely significant treaty. But we always have to remember, just by sheer size of economy and military force, China is by far the giant, the titan, and the senior your partner. Now, you said the emotional response of this administration. In the first few days, it was very interesting watching everybody from the left and the right, their view of what was going on. In the first couple of days, it was almost more like conservatives were cheering and supporting Zelensky. But then the Biden administration really essentially tried to make that the centerpiece and tried to make it a centerpiece of the State of the Union address, and it kind of flipped. I think we need to be careful in Ukraine. It should be standard U.S. policy across administrations. We don't want to see one country ruthlessly and violently invade and take over another country. I mean, we should never be for that. But we need to be extremely careful. The Ukrainians have been corrupt and been ungoverned, a wild west of criminal and intelligence activity and fraud and corruption for years. And we need to be very careful about getting entangled in this and snarled in this. We have to be very careful.
Retired Army Colonel John Mills, fascinating perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. An honor to be with you.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is receiving sharp criticism after calling for Vladimir Putin's assassination last night on Twitter. The senator posted a tweet saying, "The only way this ends is for somebody in Russia to take this guy out." Graham also alluded to the murder of Roman Emperor Julius Caesar and the attempted murder of Adolf Hitler. A bipartisan reaction condemned Graham's tweet. Senator Ted Cruz replied saying an assassination is an exceptionally bad idea. He pointed to boycotting Russian oil and gas and providing military aid to Ukraine instead. In Democrat, the turbulence in Ukraine has been having an impact on the U.S. stock market, and Americans are continuing to feel the effects of this conflict in different ways. Congressman Pete Stauber of Minnesota says that not only should energy independence be a top priority, but that back home we should be producing more rare earth minerals. We had a chance to ask him about it.
Well, I want to talk about, if I could, what my constituents are saying back home in northern Minnesota. You know, we mine the iron ore that makes 80+% of the steel in our nation. And we also have what we call the Duluth Complex. It's the biggest copper nickel find in North America. And Biden just pulled, and he and his administration and Secretary of Interior just pulled the leases so a company can't mine those critical minerals. 95% of this nation's nickel reserves are in that complex. 88% of the cobalt and over 1/3 of the copper reserves for our nation are in that complex. And they won't allow us to mine. They won't even let the company go through the process. They pulled the leases from the process. Wouldn't even let them. They didn't want to listen to the facts, the science, and the truth. And that's unacceptable, especially when they're okay with purchasing critical minerals from foreign adversarial nations that use child slave labor.
I have to ask you, I mean, why?
The politics. I believe that President Biden is following some radical anti-jobs, anti-mining people, and he's listening to them. That's devastating to the workers in northern Minnesota. We have the workforce who are ready, able, and willing to strategically help this nation reference national security and critical minerals. And they've cut us off, and that's unacceptable. And we want to make sure that this administration understands the devastation that they've put on my constituents and my workers.
Now, Congressman, you mentioned adversarial countries that use slave labor. First country that comes to mind is China. Is there a way to hold Russia accountable, at the same time not push them closer to China, which could make the world even more dangerous?
Right. Well, first off, I don't think that we should share. We should have shared some of intelligence on the Ukraine-Russia issue with a communist country of China, and we did that. And that information went right to Russia. So what we need to do, I think, is first off, we have to be, and I say this, we have to be energy and mining dominant. As Americans, we've never allowed any other country to hold the destiny of our nation in the palm of their hand.
Correct.
We can become energy independent with good policies. The Keystone XL pipeline, for example, within 5 hours of his swearing in, he cut it. Thousands of jobs. You know, we're importing like 593 barrels of oil from Russia today.
And this is a national security issue.
It's a huge national security issue. And the XL Keystone Pipeline, 835,000 barrels a day. We need to strategically secure our energy independence for us and our allies, and the mineral dominance, mining in America. We have the best environmental standards and the best labor standards right here. So what we have to do is we have to talk to the American people. You know, what is this 7.5% inflation and going higher? What does that do to you? What does it do to your pocketbook? What does it do to your family? When you're paying 30, 40, 50% more for gas, what does that do? And 30, 40, 50%, 60% more for groceries, certain grocery items. What does that do? How does it affect you? When they don't allow you're a miner in northern Minnesota and they don't allow you to mine those critical minerals. You have the skills, the passion, and the want to do it, and this administration cuts you off at the knees. What does that feel like? As Republicans, we want good, sound policy that brings manufacturing back to the shores of America, and we want energy and mining dominance, and we can do that.
Congressman Stauber, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Americans are showing support for Ukraine at all levels of government. On Thursday, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas granted all Ukrainians an 18-month stay in America, regardless of their immigration status. On Wednesday, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan and First Lady Yumi Hogan held a solidarity vigil for Ukraine. But some displays of support may have unintended consequences. Newark City Council passed a resolution to suspend licenses for Lukoil gas stations. Newark gas station owner Roger Verma says he supports sanctioning Russia, but his business is American.
I'm really lost. I feel like this is a teaching moment for those people who don't understand the inner working of the oil industry. As a Lukoil franchisee and a small business owner, we purchase all our oil from American oil companies. The employees that are hired are all local Newark employees. I'm a U.S. citizen that pays local, federal, and state taxes, and I've been doing that for the last 30 years since I've been in business.
There's a push for America to sanction Russian oil and gas, but President Biden has not yet agreed to it. Google has stopped selling online advertising in Russia. The ban covers the search engine, YouTube, and outside publishing partners. The company says in a statement, in light of the extraordinary circumstances, we're pausing Google ads in Russia. The situation is evolving quickly, and we will continue to share updates when appropriate. Google had previously suspended Russian state-funded media from buying or selling ads through its technology. Senate Republicans pass a resolution to end the COVID-19 emergency that was supposed to end on March 1st. But the question remains, are there enough votes to get it passed in the House? Former top diplomat Mike Pompeo is calling for the U.S. to recognize Taiwan diplomatically as an independent nation, adding that there is bipartisan support. The United States added 678,000 jobs in February. President Biden hailing the latest jobs report, and he said America is on a comeback. Hello, I'm Steve Lance, and welcome back to NTD's Capitol Report. The Senate voted along party lines to end the national COVID-19 emergency declaration yesterday. All Democrats present voted against it, but because a few senators were absent, Republicans were able to garner a slim majority. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer told colleagues that ending the emergency would handicap the Biden administration's ability to fight the pandemic. Republican Senator Mike Braun disagreed, saying that a large majority of the nation is now either vaccinated or enjoys natural immunity.
It's past time for the president and governors across the country to give up the extra powers granted to them under the COVID emergency declarations. If we're going to live with this virus and move forward as a country, we must end the national emergency authorization, and then other governors across the country should follow suit.
It will be hard to get the resolution through the Democrat-controlled House, and President Biden has threatened to veto the measure. Today, the Labor Department reported the U.S. added nearly 680,000 jobs, and the unemployment rate dropped to 3.8% in February. President Biden announced a plan to boost domestic manufacturing.
Today's news is a welcome reminder that we're coming back stronger as a country and as a people.
Today's event at the White House is part of Biden's Made in America initiative. CEO of Siemens USA announced that the technology company plans to invest $54 million in producing equipment for electrical infrastructure and create 300 new manufacturing jobs. With supply chains squeezed after the CCP virus pandemic, Biden is arguing that the return of factory jobs to the U.S. will help eliminate knots in the supply chain and keep inflation low.
And so many families are still struggling, though, to make ends meet because of inflation. I understand our top priority must be getting prices under control.
The national average price for a regular gallon of gas climbed to $3.84 as of today, and AAA says it's the highest since September 2012. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is calling on the U.S. to recognize Taiwan diplomatically. Pompeo is in Taiwan for a 4-day visit amid the Russia-Ukraine crisis.
It is my view that the United States government should immediately take necessary and long overdue steps to do the right and obvious thing, that is to offer the Republic of China Taiwan America's diplomatic recognition as a free and sovereign country.
This came hours after Pompeo met with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen. Tsai honored Pompeo with a presidential medal. Pompeo promoted high-level visits between the U.S. and Taiwan during his term. He also says there is bipartisan support for deepening ties with Taiwan. Earlier this month, a U.S. delegation led by former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Michael Mullen, also visited Taiwan for 2 days. The Supreme Court is reinstating the death sentence of the Boston Marathon bomber. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was given the death sentence in 2015, but a federal appeals court overturned it last year. Today, the Supreme Court reversed that decision in a 6-3 vote. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion, saying that Tsarnaev had committed heinous crimes and had received a fair trial. Justice Stephen Breyer, who voted against the reversal, asked the court to reconsider capital punishment. The Boston Marathon bombing in 2013 killed 3 people and injured 265. 17 of them lost limbs or required amputation. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds took action yesterday on what she calls protecting girls' sports. Reynolds signed a bill barring male-born athletes from competing in female sports programs at school and college. She said in a tweet, "It's a fairness issue." And her office released a statement saying, quote, "This is a victory for girls' sports in Iowa. No amount of talent, training, or effort can make up for the natural physical advantages males have over females." Reynolds was cast into the national spotlight earlier this week when she was asked to give the Republican rebuttal to President Biden's State of the Union address. And that's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. Thank you for tuning in. From Washington, D.C., I'm Steve Lance. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday.